Hey, everybody, this is Kathy. I am so sorry for the glitch that we had a little while ago. There were, I know, quite a few people that had signed on to another stream that we were attempting to do, but we had a problem. It was on my end, and I apologize for that. And it took all this time to try to figure out the glitch. Again, it was nothing having to do with YouTube. It was 100% on my end that we were not able to go live earlier as we had intended to. But the good news is, I think you can hear me now. I know that I can hear the reverb here on my end, and just wanted to say to everybody, first and foremost, happy Friday or Saturday, wherever you are, live or on replay watching. I know that we have people from all continents pretty much, starting back when I had the podcast that have followed me over here to YouTube. And it's incredible. This YouTube channel has now been up for about a year, focused on true crime. But the Idaho versus Kohberger podcast started everything. And the first 18 episodes of that podcast, which home based is on Spotify, and then from there it populated out to a number of other locations, including here on YouTube. And I really like the YouTube services because it allows people to go back and to search the podcast. We have over 850 episodes on Idaho versus Kohberger alone, and we're covering a couple of other cases. We've been covering the Idaho 4 defamation case, which is getting ready to go to trial. We just did an update today on it. That is Schofield versus Guillard. That is a 2-count defamation case. It is a civil case. It's working its way through federal court in Boise. Trial is scheduled for February. They're supposed to be the parties getting together in January, letting the court know if the trial is a go or no go. And as we've reported, the defendant, Ashley Guillard, has disappeared. She hasn't filed anything in the case in almost 2 months, missed all of the pre-trial deadlines. So at this point, we don't know if she's even going to show up for this trial. And again, this is a 2-count claim for defamation. Trial is scheduled for February, and this is a case where the plaintiff, Schofield, a professor of the University of Idaho, brought this lawsuit against Miss Guillard, who's described as an online personality, a TikToker, a psychic. And what the plaintiff said is that she was defamed, that she was online defamed when the defendant made allegations that she had something to do with the atrocities at 1122 King Road. She's already won on liability. The court has found in what's called a motion for partial summary judgment that the plaintiff was defamed. So this trial is all about damages. So we're going to continue following that case through trial. The other case that we with coverage on is State versus Wandra. Very tragic case involving a 5-year-old, difficult case, 5-year-old child who went missing. And the defendant was charged this year after 4 years, Wandra. Preliminary hearing is scheduled to occur next week. And you can read all of the briefings. They're all online. There's 2 cases on the State of Idaho Judicial Circuit webpage where you find all the Kohberger files. Wandra is the only other non-appellate case that's there. So we're going to continue to follow that. And a case that I thought I was going to be concluded with covering quite some time ago, which is Idaho versus Kohberger. Trial was supposed to happen, as you know, in August. It was supposed to go through November. And so I was actually wrapping things up with Idaho versus Kohberger and looking at other cases to possibly cover when we got the word that Mr. Kohberger had changed his plea in July, and then he was sentenced in July also. there is just a lot of what I feel is almost bizarre happenings with the unsealing of the case. Number one, I have never in my life known of a case that was this sealed before Idaho versus Kohberger. I'm not the only one. I invite you to take a look at anyone who thinks that this is anything usual or that happens in criminal cases. Please read the declaration of Rebecca Boone. She is a journalist, 26 years of experience. She's based out of Boise. She went to the University of Idaho, highly credentialed. Her declaration is on the Idaho versus Kohberger docket. It raises the First Amendment, and it said, Judge Hippler, now that Mr. Kohberger has pled guilty, please unseal this case. That motion that the media coalition filed with Ms. Boone's declaration was denied. And she said words to the effect, in all of my years of covering criminal cases in the courts, I have never seen a case this sealed in my career. And she actually went ahead and counted all of the order sealing documents and evidence, the meat and bones of the case. And she said that Judge Hippler sealed more things than Judge John Judge and Judge Marshall combined. And here we are. I just checked the docket. There's still nothing new. This is very highly unusual from Judge Hippler, even because this is the third court order that we're awaiting a ruling on regarding sealed documents. Judge Hippler entered that order October 16th. Monday will be December 15th, the full 60 days from the date of that order. And he still has not unsealed documents from January, February, and March. In comparison to the first two orders, first order was for the unsealing of documents June and July. He made a ruling within 30 days. The second order, having to do with April and May, he made a ruling within 36 days. So we're going on 60 days right now. No ruling. I don't know what even to make of this because there's nothing to the public as to why things are still sealed. There was a document that the state of Idaho filed under seal, and then there was one that was a public record dated the 25th of November. That document hasn't been released to the public. So here we are 5 months plus since the man pled guilty, and they're still treating this as like this is an active case. So I don't know what to make of this. I really don't. Do you have any thoughts? Hey, everybody, let's see who's here. We see Blueberry the Great. Thank you for hanging around. Blueberry had actually been at we were supposed to go live at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and there was a glitch on my end, not YouTube's. It was on my end. We finally figured it out, had something to eat, and then we came back. So, Blueberry, I appreciate you standing by and being patient. Number B, good to see you here tonight. G Whizical, always, hi, hello to you, always interested in the documents. Bianca Jane, thanks for being here. And for everyone else that is listening but not in chat, I invite you to come into chat. You know, it's a good opportunity to exercise your First Amendment privileges and speak about public events, public trial. Well, there's supposed to be a public trial. It's not a public trial. There was no trial, and the case is still largely sealed. Everything we do here, just as a disclaimer, is pure opinion. It is pure commentary. It is pure speculation, rhetorical questions that we ask under and that we provide under our great First Amendment founding documents to the United States Constitution, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. And again, going back to the docket, today is the 11th of, today is, what is today? The 11th or the 12th? All I know is that Monday is the 15th. Monday is the 15th. Monday, the 15th of December. It will be 60 days exactly that day since Judge Hippler issued his third court order asking the parties who were responsible for the sealing of so many documents in this case for their opinions. Should this set of documents be sealed, unsealed to the public, unsealed with redactions like he did 2 months before. I don't know what's taking so long, and I don't know why they're continuing to seal even more documents in this super secret case. Something must be going on behind the scenes. I don't know what it is. So unfortunately, I wish I had some answers for you, because these months, January, February, and March, critically important months in terms of what is under seal. Those are all the filings in limine that were filed back in February and March when there still was supposed to be a trial. The motions in limine, a motion application for a court order in limine before trial, there was a slew of filings by the state and by the defense asking Judge Hippler to make a ruling before trial on various issues. And some of it had to do with the CSLI stuff. It had to do with the tracking of suspect vehicle 1 and the 8458 phone. It had to do with the bushy eyebrows issue that came out of the Affidavit of Probable Cause. It had to do with the text messages and the 911 call. And the text messages, 100% guaranteed. You can take this to the bank every day of the week and twice on Sunday, gee whiz. I know what you know what that's a reference to, but I will tell you that Judge Stephen J. Hippler looked at the actual text messages between the roommates and the outside world that happened on November 13th that we've all heard about, but we've never seen the actual text. How great would it be to be able to see the actual text of what was going on when, for example, one of the roommates texted the private driver after he supposedly had dropped off Kaylee and Madison, "Are you still driving?" He texts back, "Yes, I am." And then the others that went back and forth between the two surviving roommates, between the surviving roommates trying to reach Kaylee and Xana and Madison. Wouldn't you like to see those actual texts? Not be told what they say, but to see the actual texts themselves. That's under seal right now. That's one of the motions in limine. That is what Judge Hippler is deciding whether to unseal or seal to the public. And the reason why I say I can guarantee to you 100% every day of the week and twice on Sunday that that's what's under seal being considered for release to the public is because the order in limine that Judge Stephen J. Hippler granted in April on the state's motion regarding the text messages and the 911 call had a chart of all the text messages, what time, who it was to, who it was from, if it was hearsay, not hearsay, if it was present sense impression, if it was going to be allowed into the trial or not. There is no way he would have been able to complete that chart without having those texts in front of him. So that's one. That is just one motion in limine that I believe the public should have been able to see when this trial was still pending, but that was kept under seal with what I've called a Mount Everest of documents under seal. I have been reporting my concerns on the sealing of this case since we started that podcast. And that podcast started way in the beginning. It started with the Affidavit of Probable Cause, which we're going over and we're looking at again. We are retracing our steps from when we first started the podcast, going through page 1 of the affidavit. That is episode 1. Page 2 of the affidavit. That's 2. 3 of the affidavit, all the way down to page number 18, where Detective Brett Payne said, based on the 17 pages beforehand, Judge Megan E. Marshall, please issue a warrant for the arrest of Mr. Kohberger. And that is the only reason why you probably even know his name, why we're even talking about him as a suspect, much less someone who stood up in open court and pled guilty to 5 of the very serious charges as he did back on July 2nd. It's because of that Affidavit of Probable Cause. Without that Affidavit of Probable Cause, the warrant wouldn't have been issued. And without that affidavit, some Josh Hewitt, I don't know if you've listened to the podcast that he did just a few days ago. I've got it posted, the link on my community page here on YouTube. He had said, hey, without that sheath and the DNA, would it do you think Mr. Kohberger would have ever been arrested? And his thought was, yeah, but it would have taken a lot more time. I disagree. I think without that sheath, there was not enough to arrest him. So that is why we are focusing on the affidavit. What we're doing right now is we're going back page by page. Now, unlike with, blindfolded, with only going on what with what just Detective Payne wrote, now we have the benefit of some information. The body cams, we've gotten the interviews. There have been documents that have been all the reports, not all, a lot of the reports from the Moscow Police Department, the Idaho State Police. So it's with that perspective that we're going back and we are looking at each page of that affidavit of probable, because that is the document that started everything. That is effectively document number 1 in Idaho versus Kohberger, to see how well it held up. A lot of people had concerns, myself included, when I first saw that affidavit. There were typographical errors in there. There were important errors, like we've reported on our, I think it was episode number 3. We've published episode number 4. It's on page 4, and it's called the frozen shock phase. And it addresses when Detective Payne is addressing what the evidence was supposedly from DM. And I pointed out where he's interjected his own thoughts at least a couple of times there. Real important to go back and look at that, because again, without that PCA, an arrest warrant wouldn't have been issued, and there's a possibility the arrest warrant would have never been issued. Let's see who else is here. People are not, says number 8. Hi, redacted, doing redacted. I really feel like it was, and giving thoughts, redacted. And don't they have Kaylee's diary? Could be. I have to keep saying this, and I published a post the other day. You know what my top 3 answers are, both on the Idaho versus Kohberger podcast, from wherever people are listening. And it's on Spotify, it's on Amazon, it's on iHeart, it's on a ton of other platforms I don't even know about. But we'll get feedback. And my top 3 answers, and I don't do this very much tongue in cheek, is, well, I'd like to be able to answer your question. However, the answer is under seal, or it's under seal with redactions, or the answer lies in documents that Judge Hippler has not yet decided whether he will unseal, seal with redactions, or remain sealed from the public further on. And I'm sorry, but until we get these documents under seal, we're not going to know what this case is all about. I know that some of you feel that, hey, Mr. Kohberger pled guilty, which he absolutely did under oath in a court of law. He's the right person, some of you feel. And what's the big deal? Other people feel it's not that. It doesn't even matter. Hey, Michael, thank you so much. Happy holidays to you as well. I'm so happy that you're here. Other people say, I feel he's not guilty, just based on my First Amendment privilege of looking at what we see here. I feel they got the wrong person. I feel he was a scapegoat. Still others say, I think he's guilty, but I think someone else, it's a 2-person at least job. There's no possibility in the world, especially now with the injuries, now that we've gotten a synopsis of the injuries of all of these attacks on Xana alone, how long that must have taken, and running up and down the steps, attacking Kaylee and Madison, and then Xana and Ethan. Hey, no possibility. People say it's got to be at least 2 people, maybe even more. And yeah, maybe Mr. Kohberger was one of them, and maybe Mr. Kohberger wasn't. But the majority of people who follow this channel feel that it is a dangerous precedent that's been set in having this case be as sealed as it was pre-trial, and to still be as sealed as it is 5 months after the man pled guilty. I cannot think of a reason in the world why that case wasn't completely unsealed the day he was sentenced. And at this pace that Hippler's going right now, I had given an estimate that I thought it would take 2 years to get to the beginning of the case where all of the important stuff is, because that's what led to the arrest warrant. What was the evidence that supported that affidavit of probable cause? There had to be more, or maybe there wasn't, but he's not going to get to that until he gets to the stuff from December of 2022. Let's look at where he is right now. Judge Stephen J. Hippler has entered 2 orders thus far, and he didn't even unseal everything. He still kept some things sealed, and he unsealed others that were so heavily redacted, it was extremely difficult to understand what was going on, such as the minutes from the closed hearing on the motion for alternative perpetrators. That document was so heavily sealed, the minutes I'm talking about, it was hard to make head or tails from what Judge Hippler was saying, other than there was one that I was quite shocked at, where he's our trial, and a person who's a reporter, she had called in and she was asking questions, it's like, what are you doing behind closed doors having those conversations? That's an issue. Hey, Amy is back. Amy, I'm sorry that we didn't go live the first time. We had technical problems. It was completely on my side, Amy, but I'm glad that you were able to be with us. So Charm Free. Hey, good to see you, Charm Free. And Michael Clayton, very dangerous. Michael is agreeing. The First Amendment and our founding documents, which is the Constitution of the United States, and all of the amendments, most particularly the Bill of Rights and the 14th Amendment. That's where the Due Process Clause came into effect. And that's where 14th Amendment, all of the due process privileges that we have that separates us from countries like China and Iran and Iraq, that's where that is. And it says you got to have 3 things before a state government is looking to take away your life, your liberty, or your property. Number 1, you need notice of what it is that they're doing, an opportunity to be heard, and an impartial, if it's a non-jury trial, sometimes it is, an impartial judge. If it is a jury trial, you need an impartial judge and an impartial jury. Someone who is disinterested, someone who doesn't have a stake in the action, who's not prejudiced against either side, fair to both sides. And we ran a poll a while back, and I think that the majority of you felt that there was bias and that it was against Mr. Kohberger. I, for one, very, very concerned from a due process perspective that Judge Hippler didn't grant that motion to postpone, to continue the trial. I think it was necessary, given at the time what was happening. This was final pretrial conference mid-May. A couple days before then came that devastating Dateline episode where we were told as the public, oh, no, you can't see video from the 1112 camera. That would be a violation of Mr. Kohberger's due process privileges. Jury could be tainted by seeing that. Or, hey, nope, there's other, the state has a right to a fair trial. State has, and all of a sudden the eternal intel, and there's video of suspect vehicle 1 doing the alleged, the 3-point turn, speeding out of the neighborhood at a high rate of speed. It was like, how did they get that video? Not to mention all of the other stuff that was in that episode of Dateline. How in the heck does mass media get that when we, the public, were told you are not entitled to see that video? Then when Judge Hippler put out those 2 orders that he did at the final pretrial conference or shortly thereafter, even he said he felt that it was the state side, someone connected with law enforcement or the state. He didn't think it was the defense's side at that time. So something had to happen. He had to be given some knowledge to make him say that he felt it was a member of the state or the defense that was involved with possibly a violation of the non-dissemination order, aka contempt of court, criminal contempt of court, that was responsible for that, leaking that information to Dateline. He puts out the 2 orders. He says right in their 14th Amendment type language, this is going to make it difficult to seat an impartial jury. By that time, they were basically on the steps of jury selection, and he refused to postpone that trial. I still will not. I mean, I have agreed with some of his orders. I agreed with some of the motions to suppress because I think that standing was not argued. It needed to be argued in that case. And I've done a ton of presentations already why I feel that. I feel the defense dropped the ball on that one and he ruled properly. But I think he should have continued that trial. And I also feel that he shouldn't have denied that motion for alternative perpetrators. He improperly made a jury finding, which I know several of you have pointed out as well. There's 2 footnotes in that order denying the alternative perpetrator theory, allowing Mr. Kohberger to raise that defense, where Judge Hippler says, oh, no, the people that are apparently in, and that was another thing that was under seal. The alternative perpetrators, I think there were 3 or 4 of them. Oh, they're within walking distance of 1122 King Road. The perpetrator drove to 1122 King Road. And I was like, what are you doing? That's not a judge question. That's a jury question. It is a disputed fact whether the perpetrator or perpetrators drove, walked, skateboarded, crawled, were inside the house already, ran, jogged to 1122 King Road. That was completely improper for Judge Hippler to make that decision. And I give my opinion under the First Amendment. So now we have this plea of guilty. It's 5 months later. This case we've only seen a few documents under seal from July, June, May, and April 2025. We are a couple of weeks away from the end of the year. He hasn't even issued an order yet asking the parties to give their input from anything from within 2024. And the end of 2024 is also important because that's when all the motions to suppress. That's when that Franks hearing motion, all of the under seal documentation, what Mr. Kohberger produced under seal for that Franks hearing. And I want to see it, especially now that we're looking back at the Affidavit of Probable Cause with the perspective of being able to compare what we know now that we didn't have at that time. One of the motions to suppress was the Affidavit of Probable Cause. If that would have, hi Thrive, glad to see you Thrive here. Glad to see several more people. Meanie, thanks, welcome. I want to see what was in that Franks, what was in support of that Franks motion. What was in support of that Franks motion? And that would have basically set aside. Could you imagine if the Affidavit of Probable Cause got thrown out on a Fourth Amendment violation? Affidavit of everything that happened thereafter, everything that they did thereafter wouldn't have happened without that Affidavit of Probable Cause. Now, again, I feel that the defense blew that one because they didn't argue the important matter of standing. What standing did Mr. Kohberger have, for example, to argue against the testing, the IgG, and but hey, we're talking about a situation that happened months before. We're talking about a situation that supposedly happened from December 19th, 2022, when the lead detective, same person who signed his name to the Affidavit of Probable Cause, testified under oath at a hearing before Judge Hippler, January 23rd, and said they had not known of Mr. Kohberger. He was not a suspect in the case until the evening of December 19th, when that infamous Teams hearing happened. And then 10 days later, boom, here's the Affidavit of Probable Cause asking for the man's arrest. Hey, I'm glad to see you, J-Rod. Thank you for joining us here. Thank you. Yes, Bianca, thank you. If everyone could hit that like, it would really, really help the channel. It would really help the channel so much. Thank you, Bianca. Thank you. Meany is saying, if I was his attorney, I would have been furious. I was furious just watching. Is that in relation to the pleading of guilty based on what you have now? Number 8, thank you. Michael Clayton is saying the affidavit of probable cause in this case was complete trash. The major questions are concerning the DNA authenticity and documentation of custody and lab work. Well, let's not get into that can of worms, or should we, regarding chain of custody and the lab work. We all recall what happened to that sheath, right? Supposedly, Detective Brett Payne, page 1 and pages 2 of the Affidavit of Probable Cause, states that he arrived at 1122 King Road at approximately 4 p.m., accompanied by whom? Sergeant Blacker, who would go on to basically be the face of the Moscow Police Department with the Idaho State Police lab. Detective Payne seems to have been kept out of that situation. It was Blacker who took every piece of physical evidence, who signed off on it, who asked ISP to conduct their forensic testing. And you all know that ISP did not decide what was going to be tested and not tested. Oh, no. That comes from the submitting agency. That comes from the Moscow Police Department. So if something such as the thing that HJ had in his hand when just about noon, when Nunez turns up, if that wasn't tested by the Idaho State Lab, you know why it wasn't tested? Because it was not submitted by the Moscow Police Department for testing. So we have a situation where now we know from the Affidavit of Probable Cause that there seems to be something very odd with what Detective Payne is saying on pages 1 and 2. Right off the bat, he says that it was one of the first responders, Officer Corbin Smith, who offered to take him through the house and took him up to the house. And in fact, took him up to the 3rd floor. And they look into Kaylee's bedroom. And that's where he writes about, oh, there was a dog here. Kaylee's dog was in there. And the dog was removed for reasons I still don't understand, rather than being kept in that room. He was docile. He wasn't making a ruckus. They closed the door, crate in there, food in there, water in there. He could have gone out on the balcony if he needed to do his business. And ISP could have clipped his hair and his paws to see if there was any sort of evidence on him. But let's put that aside for 1 second. Then he says, Smith points to a room across that little hall, and Payne says something odd. He says, later, I noticed a sheath standing by the door. And we have for years wondered what later meant. What later might have meant is the second walkthrough that happened at 5 after MPD got the warrant signed that allowed ISP to start processing, because they would have to start taking things out of that house. And they couldn't do that without a warrant. The warrant was signed around 4:30-ish or right after that. At 5 p.m., you had the group of 5. You had Jennings. You had Thompson. You had Blacker. You had Payne. And then you had the head of ISP, crime scene processing, who do a walkthrough at 5 o'clock. Now, hey, call me stupid, call me dense, but I would have thought that the coroner would have joined in on that walk. Because didn't the coroner say in an interview that she gave within a few days after November 13th that she arrived on scene at 5 p.m.? Well, I want to know, if that's the case, why wasn't she one of the 6? Or really, what was Ashley Jennings and Bill Thompson doing there? They're not law enforcement, but that's another show as to what they're doing. Leslie and Billy, good to see you here. Leslie and Billy, Blue Radio 60. Oh, glad to see everyone talking. So we had, at 5 o'clock, and then the head of ISP says that the sheath was on the left side. Payne says it's on the right side. The public has never seen a photograph of this sheath as it was allegedly found on the bed. None of the 5 first responders mentioned word one about that sheath. If you read the reports of Nunez, Warner, Gunderson, Smith, Snyder, not one. All five of them went up into that room. Some of them went up more than once, and none of them mentioned a sheath. Snyder, who took multiple photographs, including multiple photographs inside that bedroom on the third floor, not one is captioned sheath. Now, I would have expected 60 photographs of the sheath from all that, from above, from beyond, here, standing over here, standing from the door at the foot of the bed, overhead, underneath. Not one mentioned a sheath. But then we can also go off on another tangent. Where was Snyder's partner, K9 Ragnar? I hope that you've been watching and giving your input, whether you agree or disagree, with the fact that I find it a little odd, and again, this is First Amendment, why this K9, who is a rug sniffer, and specifically begins with the letter F as in Frank, ends with L, that poison that has been the demise of so many people in this country, that's what he was trained to find. Rugs, and specifically the F rug. Snyder and Ragnar were called to do something having to do with rugs at 11:15 a.m. on November 13th, approximately a mile away, a little bit over a mile away from 1122 King Road, 479 feet away from one of the last places where Ethan was known to be in public, at that brewery. That's where that social was. That's where Ragnar and Snyder were. Legendary, thank you for your kindness. It's good to see you here. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. So Ragnar and Snyder are called to do what do? They search a car. They search a person. And if the dog starts jumping around, going in circles, bingo, he has found more, a rug. Like, he wasn't trained for marijuana. He wasn't trained for. It was the more hardcore, and specifically the F word. So Snyder and Officer Ragnar, he's K9, he's a sworn member of the MPD, go to this location at 11:30. And that's the last that we've heard of Ragnar. There was no report made of that K9 search. If we look at the stuff that was just released in body cam, I think that Jules got a hold of, you see now we find out that what Snyder did is he drove to that location in a regular MPD car. He is given, his normal car has K9 on it because it supports being able to bring Ragnar to scenes. And Ragnar was purchased in 2021. City of Moscow allowed for that purchase because the Moscow Police Department went to the city commission and said, we need a K9 to help with Moscow's growing rug problem. And then you see the likes of people coming out of 1122. Remember that noise complaint? Didn't it look like a possible sighting of EB coming out of 1122 King Road, who was then arrested shortly thereafter with her boyfriend? They're called, I think, Bonnie and Clyde, up in Washington, related to the unaliving of a U of I student up there, dealing with an OD. Okay, so why is Snyder turning up? And he doesn't have his body cam on. That is extremely strange to me, because if he's going on a rug sniffing situation with Ragnar, don't you think he'd have his body cam on? Because if the person gets arrested, defense counsel is going to want the body cam from the sniffing episode, and to see Ragnar running around in circles. Now, just imagine, we're not making any comments about anything, but on November 13th, 2022, supposedly the MPD did not know what the motive was. Imagine seeing Snyder walking through and then the dog starts running around in circles. Not saying that that was from any, would have been from any of them. I'm not saying anything because the dog didn't go. But there was another canine there later in the day. He's a dark-haired canine, acting like maybe a bloodhound. So why are you bringing in a canine team, maybe from ISP, but you're letting your own officer not go to what that dog was trained to do? These canines go to canine academies. Ragnar went with Snyder to a canine academy, and some of these dogs get more training than human officers do at the police academy. Questions galore. Blueberry is saying, was the chief discovered after Bill Thompson? I'm not sure when like in this last bunch of imagery, we just got some, I think Connor put it up yesterday. And part of that video shows second in command. Remember Captain Roger Lanier, who wound up quitting or retiring, I shouldn't say quit, retiring in June of 2023 when the trial was supposed to happen in October. You see him. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe this is what this is who Corbin Smith walked through, because Corbin Smith's report doesn't say word one about Payne, doesn't say he walked Payne through. So at this point, we don't know if maybe Payne went up there by himself, or maybe someone else took Payne through there. But, another thing with the recent sharing by Connor of Corbin Smith's body cam, you see Smith going off duty at 3:30. He's looking for his car. He's handing over his little book that he was keeping, who's coming in, who's going out the back door. Hey, Yvonne, good to see you. I'm glad you made this live. He's looking like he's going off duty. And that's consistent with his report, because his report was written at 4:04 and signed at 4:17. He doesn't say anything about taking Payne upstairs. What he did do is he walked up Captain Lanier. And then when Captain Lanier left, he is walking outside and he is walking over the shoe prints in the snow. The number of people that were in that house, the walking up and down. Smith himself, he's in the kitchen like it's his conference room. He's meeting with Lanier. He's meeting with Warner. He's meeting with Gunderson. He's going in and out of that back slider, what's supposed to be the point of entry and exit of the perpetrator. I'd like to know how much evidence did ISP lab process that came from members of the Moscow Police Department. Their hairs, we drop DNA whether we like it or not. Every time someone goes into a crime scene, from what I've read, they want to keep it to a minimum because people are taking evidence maybe on their shoes, on their gloves, of the crime when they're walking out the door, or they're dropping their own. So Michael's saying yes, and Bonnie and Clyde got dismissed from first. That was so strange, Michael. A lot of people thought maybe they're CIs. Maybe they squealed on someone else. But yeah, I remember when that story, they were called Bonnie and Clyde, but EB was certainly seen coming out of 1122 that one night when the Moscow Police Department showed up. I think it was like September 1st, 2020. Yeah, 2022. It was shortly before the crimes. Okay, Beanie is saying Canine Officer Ragnar won an award for sniffing rugs. He's obviously very good at his job. He should have been there. He's also he's not just an MPD officer. He's also been sworn in as a Latah County sheriff. I doubt anyone else on the MPD has those credentials. Why wouldn't you bring your body cameras? Yvonne, I don't know. Gunderson, you don't see Gunderson body camera from when he's driving to the scene to when he gets out and walks to 1122 King. We're not seeing that from Snyder. Snyder didn't have a body cam. Snyder was given a body cam by Corbin Smith when he was in the back for the first 20 minutes, 15 minutes or so. He had no body cam. They were not wearing booties. But I want to know, why do you need to have all these people going in and out, up and down the steps, going to the bed? You know, what do you think? And after you cleared the house the first time and you found the 4 unalived students, what do you think? Going up a third time, you're going to find the perpetrator, or the students are not going to be unalived? They just kept going up there. Oh, Kylie, it's so good to see you. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to Kylie and everyone in chat. So it is very, very perplexing. Oh, Richard's art, aloha all. I am here. I'm very happy you're here, Richard. We've missed you at the Indie Zone past a little while. Yvonne saying, because everyone was nosy and wanted to see. But the problem then, Yvonne, you know, I'd like your opinion on this, is every time they're going into, especially the 2 bedrooms, they are possibly taking DNA away and dropping DNA away. Yes, Bianca, thank you. If everyone could please, thanks, Bianca, for reminding me. Everyone, please hit the like. It would really help the channel. So the entry log. Okay, I was calling it the book. Yes, Blueberry has correctly pointed out that when Officer Smith was assigned, and I don't understand, why didn't he stand outside? Why does he got to keep going in and out the point of entry? I want to know, how many times did he hit that slider when he's going in and out? Because it wasn't opened all the way. And even so, why are you stepping over the point of entry and exit per the MPD? Now, I'm not saying that that's my theory on the point of entry and exit. There's possibility that the entry and exit could have been up on the 3rd floor balcony. There's a possibility the point of entry and exit could have been the front door with its very susceptible lock system. It could have been through a window. It could have been any combination. But the point is that in the PCA, it says that from the beginning, the Moscow Police Department believed that that slider in the back was the point of entry and exit. So what the heck are you doing going in and out and in and out? If you're supposed to be guarding the back door, stay outside. If you're cold, get a jacket. Don't keep going in and out 1,000 times. And then you got Captain Lanier. Watch that video. He's walking right over those tracks in the snow. We don't know if those tracks in the snow had anything to do with anything, but the Moscow Police Department certainly did, because Corbin Smith took photographs. Leslie and Billy, thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate you being here. So Richard saying, we also know via original video that the crime scene tech were carefully yet obviously stepping over something in the kitchen. Yes, you're talking about the Idaho State Police crime scene tech. We saw that outside. From I think it was day 1 when the media were there. They were filming from the outside, and there were about 3 people that were gathered in front of that great room window that were pointing down, taking photographs. They seemed very concerned at whatever the heck it was. And just imagine, how many times was that area trampled over by the Moscow Police Department and the prosecutors who walked in and out for reasons unknown. You know, it seemed like there wasn't a heck of a lot of concern about making sure that that crime scene was as pristine as it possibly could be, especially since they had an 8-hour gap there. Let's not even talk about that. The MPD's coming in, the perpetrator or perpetrators had an 8-hour advance getaway on them. Charm Free is agreeing, makes no sense. Charm Free is accusing, and I think a lot of people might agree with you, but people are just being nosy. They should have, Kamini is saying that they should care about the integrity of the crime scene more than their own curiosity. Yes. Meany is saying all the windows were unlocked except for Dylan's bedroom, Bethany's bedroom, and the 3rd floor hall. Any other window could have been a point of entry. I agree with you very, very easily. Very, very easily it could have been. All day long they walked. Yes, they did, Yvonne. Even before, I remember seeing something. Remember Remember from the videos, you see the Idaho State Police pulling up with that long trailer truck. It was maybe about 2:45 p.m., but they didn't enter. They didn't enter until after the warrant. And it was really just, at first, it was the head of the crime scene tech, the one detective. His name escapes me at this time. But one of the members of ISP at about, 10 minutes to 5, walked up to one of the members of the Moscow Police Department and said, "Hey, you guys aren't walking around in there, are you?" And I said to myself, "You're about 5 hours too late with that question. And what's this about removing Murphy?" Murphy could have had evidence on him. I don't know if the Idaho State Police knew that there was a live dog in there on the 3rd floor in a bedroom. I don't know. Did Gunderson contact ISP and say, "Hey, is it okay? For whatever reason, maybe he was concerned about the dog's welfare. Should we take this dog out, or should we leave it here until you have an opportunity to come in and process him?" We don't even know if that question was asked. And we don't even know. I mean, these are members of a police department that had never dealt with anything of this catastrophic detail. The last unaliving that they had was somewhere around 2015. And now they're walking in with a mass unaliving of this extent. What training did they have? Ask questions, maybe. K7, thank you for sharing. Yes, Brian's car does not have fog lights, but the Elantra going past the 1132 house has fog lights. Gray Hughes agrees that it's not. Oh, Gray Hughes has agreed that it's not his car. That is very interesting. Chris Donna, finding the glove. Well, we all know what Detective Payne said on the 23rd of January. None of those things, the red DNA on the railing wasn't put through CODIS. Why? Because they wanted to go with the sheath, and they were afraid that if they put another DNA profile, i.e. the red stuff on the railing, that would seem to be more direct evidence potentially. Oh no, we didn't put it through because we thought that it would wipe out all of the stuff for BK. As if. Have you ever heard an explanation like that in your life? In your life. Does that mean if there were a group of 5 hoodlums who go in and commit a horrendous crime, what's CODIS going to say? "Oh, I'm sorry, you can only test 1. You're going to have to let the other 4 go." Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Bianca Jane. She has gifted someone membership to whoever it is. Thank you. Thank you on their behalf. Okay. Congratulations. They've been laboring. Yeah. As Blueberry the Great makes a great point, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the most critical DNA redacted. Am I speaking, nonsense here? I agree. I mean, this is a 4 people unaliving, and you've got red DNA on the railing where the perpetrator could have escaped or walked up or down or whatever. And what about the nefarious activity on the 1st floor with Bethany saying that she had a firecracker going and she saw a light? Could that have been someone pushing in the front door and coming in? Couldn't have been anyone on the 2nd or 3rd floor, because where her bedroom is, she doesn't face the front door. She could not have seen or heard something, I don't think, coming from the 2nd or 3rd floor. And that really lends a lot of credence to at least a 2 perpetrator minimum. Nothing about that in the PCA. Nothing about Bethany seeing and hearing something on the 1st floor. That might have been something going off on the 1st floor that would make a bang, that would make that type of a sound, that would make that type of a noise, that would make a light go off. Kylie, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Kylie, when I started the podcast, looking at the first 18 episodes of the Affidavit of Probable Cause, it was to search for the truth of what happened to Kaylee, to Madison, to Xana, and Ethan on that day. That was my whole purpose. I didn't care if it was Mr. Kohberger, if it wasn't Mr. Kohberger, if it was Mr. Kohberger with someone else. Well, of course, if it wasn't him, that I was concerned about, an innocent person possibly being given the ultimate penalty. under our system of government, which is capital. But I don't think that we know, and we will not know until Judge Hippler unseals that case and stops with the sealing of evidence. Speaking of the affidavit of probable cause, has anyone relooked at the 18-page document? That document, I cannot emphasize how important it is, because that document is what got the warrant issued. Without that affidavit of probable cause, Judge Megan E. Marshall would not be signing off on anything, because it was the affidavit of probable cause that was presented to her, not the evidence. They don't go in there with all the evidence. It's the cop who's signing under penalty of perjury that what's there true, that this car, SV1, was Mr. Kohberger's car, that this sheath had Mr. Kohberger's DNA on it, that the phone that went off and on and was tracked, and all, that was Mr. Kohberger's. She's not looking at the evidence. So without that PCA, no arrest warrant on the 29th of December, 2022, possibly never an arrest warrant. But I disagree with Josh Hurwitz. I think his interview that he just published is extremely important wherever you stand. If you think the prosecution did a poor job, if you think the prosecution put someone behind bars, basically, who was, listen to that interview. He gives you so much. He says right in that interview that the Moscow Police Department called in the feds, even though Josh said, Mr. Hurwitz said, he didn't believe that there would ever be a federal prosecution here. The reason why the feds were called in is that the Moscow Police Department, according to him, were too small to be able to handle a case like this. So if that's the case, a lot of people have been thinking, well, the case is sealed because of the feds and they're starting. Nope, that came directly from Josh Hurwitz. Don't take my word. Listen to his interview, and you'll see it. J-Rod, 12 a.m. weekends. Okay, no, hey, plug away. J-Rod has been a very big supporter of me for many years. So definitely check out his work. He's got, I think, a second channel now, right, J-Rod? That On Point Rican. And J-Rod is a very, very big proponent of the Constitution of the United States, as I am. Puerto Rico, of course, is not a foreign government. It is a territory of it is part of the U.S. And J-Rod is very protective of the rights that come with our Constitution. I don't know how they didn't have a Frank's hearing, is what Kylie is saying. Kylie, that's why we need to see the documents under seal. What did the defense propose for the Frank's hearing? That's the documents that were filed in the later part of 2024. The documents that Judge Stephen J. Hippler hasn't even gotten to yet. So let's consider this, ladies and gentlemen. It is now, we're about 2 weeks away from the end of the year, right? This case has been closed for 5 months. Thus far, Judge Hippler has unsealed, not all, but some, and some with redactions, documents from April, May, June, July. How much more time is it going to take till he gets to the beginning of the case, which is December of 2022, going at this pace? I had originally thought, I had estimated, based on him coming back after 30 and 36 days with something for the first 2 orders, that it would be 2 years. I've got to modify that. It might take us into the end of 2027, maybe even 2028, because now what he's got to do is when he goes to the beginning, he's got to now circle back around for all the documents that got sealed after July. And there are already several of them that have been sealed from July through November. Who knows how many more are going to be sealed in the weeks and the months and possibly even years to come. So in other words, he's got to finish this cycle of going to the beginning of the case, which is, again, December 2022. That's when this case started. Then when he's done that, 2 years down the line or whatever it is, he's got to go back to all the documents that were sealed from July, August, September, October, November, and whatever else gets sealed. It's like this case just keeps going in circles with sealing of documents. Okay. So has anyone gone back? I'd like to know just a show of well, hey, Leslie and Billy, I know a lot of people are saying Mr. Kohberger should appeal. Now that you're starting to see some of the evidence, why did he not go to trial? A lot of people, of course, we don't know because a lot of things are under seal. That's, again, the answer to so many questions. We can't know. We don't know because that information's under seal. Number one, he's got to want help. He's got to want to be able to, under what theory, don't know, to possibly appeal his plea. That makes things a little bit sticky because he stood up in open court and did that. But if there's new evidence that's found, for instance, if it can be shown that he had ineffective assistance of counsel, he didn't know what he was really doing, possibility. Now, I will tell you, because a lot of people were saying, oh gosh, he's going to have to get private attorney. They're expensive, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? In State versus Wandra, read the case, read the stuff about that case, read the documents, or listen to some of the stuff that we published already because we're following that case. He was faced with another crime, not the crime that we're following right now, the unaliving of the 5-year-old child, but he had pled guilty to another unrelated. It was a rug-related charge. Then he turned around and he decided, you know what? I want to appeal my guilty plea. He was assigned a public defender who did appellate work in Idaho. So there are Idaho-based public defenders. Then the question becomes, should he still get somebody out of the state of Idaho? No connection to the state. Kathy, hey, good to see you here. Kathy has been one of my OG supporters. I mean, going back to the podcast. I'm so happy that you're here. So anyway, the Affidavit of Probable Cause, must reading. I think for anyone who is interested in the facts of the case, because we deal with the facts, we don't deal with the fairy tales. And what we've done so far is we have retraced the beginning of the podcast with the benefit of information under seal. Oh, 1 point Puerto Rico is saying, I am replaying the April 10th suppression hearing. That hearing to me was the climax of the case. That was one of them. I agree with you, J. Rod. Big climax. Add to it, though, I would add to it the denial of the motion to continue the trial after that disastrous Dateline episode came out that was so, I mean, I didn't hear the words, people are innocent in this country until proven guilty in a court of law. Not once during that episode. That episode 100% was against Mr. Kohberger. As he's getting ready to stand trial, I think that trial should have been continued to let things calm down a little bit. And also, I think the third nail in the coffin would have been the denial of the alternate perpetrators' defense. Bianca, have a great night. I'm glad you were able to pop in as always. Okay, so anyway, we're now retracing the Affidavit of Probable Cause, saying what we know now that we didn't know before, even with the case still largely under seal. We do have quite a bit of information. And so episode 1 was Detective Payne arrives, and that's where we talk about, well, he's saying that Corbin Smith walked him through, but here Corbin Smith doesn't mention word 1 about Detective Payne. He mentions other members of the Moscow Police Department, not Payne, and he doesn't mention taking the lead detective through the crime scene. And he also seemed like he was going off duty at 3:30 p.m. and he turned off his body cam. Now, I asked Connor specifically, he's the independent journalist that got a hold of a bunch of these new records, documents from the MPD, the Moscow Police Department. I asked him, okay, so you've got 2 pieces of Corbin Smith's body cam. Didn't they send you body cam of when he purportedly walked Detective Payne through? And that's when the sheath was found, supposedly, or he later noticed the sheath. And what Connor said is that, no, this is all they sent me. So question 1, did Payne make a walkthrough at 4 o'clock? Question 2, if he did, who walked him? 3. Question 3, if it was Officer Smith, why wasn't that in his report? Question 4, where's the body cam of Officer Smith walking him through? That's Detective Brett Payne. All of these questions. That's what we're able to talk about now looking at the Affidavit of Probable Cause. So that was episode 1, Detective Payne arrives on scene. The last one, frozen shock phase. Those words never came out of her mouth. She never said to anyone that I froze with fear. I went into a frozen shock phase. And if you look at the PCA, those words are in quotes, like it came out of the witness's mouth. You know, so we have a lot of information we can go back on. I am Richard, I'm very, very happy that you're here. Very happy you're here. Frozen shock phase. That was one of the most curious and one of the most debated, most notorious aspects of the PCA. What I want to do now is I've already recorded episode 5 that's going to be coming out this weekend. And that is entitled episode 5, part number 5, page 5 of the Affidavit of Probable Cause. 3 years later is entitled A White Sedan Known Suspect Vehicle 1. Okay, let's look at the PCA if we can together. You can pull it up if you want to go online. It is on the Idaho versus Kohberger. The case is of judicial interest. You have to go back to 2022. Let's just look at page 4 a little bit. We're not going to read the entire page. You can tune in for the podcast episode number 5. And it says here, bottom 4 to 5, DM locked herself in her room after seeing the mail. DM did not state that she recognized the mail. This leads investigators to believe that the unaliver left the scene. So now I have to interject immediately. Payne is saying that because DM did not state that she recognized the mail, that this is what led the investigators to believe that not only was this the unaliver, but that he had left the scene. What is confusing to me is, well, did you ask that question? Did she recognize this person or not? He's saying here, did not state that she recognized the person, not that the interviewer, whether it would have been Mallory, whether it would have been Nunez or whoever interviewed DM. Hey, DM, did you recognize the guy in black with the face mask? No, I didn't. He's making an assumption here. All right. What else do you know that this is the unaliver? Who saw that this was the unaliver and not someone else? What is it that's making you, Detective Payne, conclude at this early stage, this is page number 5 at the top of the PCA, that this is the unaliver? Now let's look. Here we go. The next paragraph. The combination of DM statements to law enforcement reviews a forensic download of records from BF and DM's phone. This is why these text messages are so critical that Judge Hippler has under seal right now, because the public would then be able to look at the actual text messages, compare it to what this recently released evidence from the 1112 camera is. And if you hear a dog bark or you hear what you sounds like a scream to you, you can then compare to what you're seeing and hearing on the 1112 camera. Let's go back. Combination of DM statements to law enforcement, reviews of forensic downloads of records from BF and DM's phone, and video of a suspect video, as described below, leads investigators to believe the unalivings occurred between, not approximately, but they occurred between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. This is the top of the Affidavit of Probable Cause. Page number 5, first full paragraph, Detective Payne, penalty of perjury, crimes occurred between 4 and 4:25 a.m. Now with retrospect, we have to ask the rhetorical question. If the crimes occurred between 4 o'clock and 4:25 a.m., Detective Payne, first and foremost, the video from the 1112 camera shows this car that you say is suspect vehicle 1 making a 3-point turn, driving around It was seen on camera until when? Approximately 4:07. So, okay, so now we have cut now this original timeline from not 4 o'clock, but sometime after 4:07. Because if at 4:07, that's the last time SV1 is seen, it's got to get to the house. It's got to park somewhere near the house. The perpetrator or the perpetrators need to get out of the car, need to turn the car off, need to walk front door back to wherever they entered and enter the house. That might not be until 4:08 a.m. So, question regarding the start of the timeline. But even more perplexing, the crimes occurred between 4 o'clock and 4:25. Yet a little bit later on, he writes that suspect vehicle 1 is seen speeding out of the neighborhood at a high rate of speed at 4 o'clock. You guys remember where that's said in the affidavit of probable cause? Do you remember that video that you've seen of a car seen speeding out of the neighborhood at a high rate of speed at 4:20 a.m.? I think it's 4:20 and 40 seconds, something like that. So, therefore, if that's correct, if SV1, supposedly with Mr. Kohberger in it, is seen speeding out of the neighborhood at 4:20 at a high rate of speed, who's still inside the house committing the crimes until 4:25? Because that's what is stated at page number 5 at the top. And that's just paragraph number 1. We're going to go through that entire page. And this is now with the benefit of evidence that we didn't have 3 years ago when we first looked at the PCA. How can possibly Detective Payne go to Judge Marshall, and how can she sign off on this warrant for an arrest based on this PCA when it says one person committed this crime? He's seen speeding out of the neighborhood at 4:20 a.m., but the crimes continue until 4:25. All right, so we're going to use a little bit of logic and common sense here. If he's seen speeding out of the neighborhood at 4:20 and approximately 40 seconds, whatever it was, he needed time to exit the house, whether it was through a window, balcony on the 3rd floor, a slide or backslider on the 2nd floor, as law enforcement believes, through the front door, through a window. There needed to be time to leave the house, go to the car, start the car, get in the car, drive to where the camera's seen. Let's call that 4:19. So who's inside the house from 4:19 to 4:25? These are the types of things that we can look at now, 3 years later, to make a determination if this PCA holds up. And so J-Rod is saying, in my opinion, Scott Green told MPD protect the vandals at any cost. A lot of people feel that the university had quite a bit of input. Look, this house was not on, it would be a different situation if this happened at Sigma Chi, because Sigma Chi is located on the University of Idaho property. This house is off campus. This house was not on campus. So what is President Green doing in meetings with law enforcement behind closed doors when they're discussing their strategy? What is he doing standing beside Chief Fry, Captain Lanier, members of the ISP? He's not a member of law enforcement. This didn't happen on property. So there, and let's go back to the statement early on. November 13th, 2022. Did MPD or did MPD not issue a statement saying no threat to the community? Why? Because they didn't want a mass exodus out of Moscow because of the severe economic reliance that university has. Rhetorical questions. We're just throwing them out there. We're making comments. This is not based on fact. We have no further information but our common sense. What J-Rod is saying here is, in his opinion, there was a lot of involvement, had a lot of sway with, let's just economics. Who polices the University of Idaho campus? They don't have an independent team of law enforcement. It's the MPD. The MPD is their on-site law enforcement official. Any additional, if somebody goes on vacation, it's the MPD who follows up. The MPD brings in revenue just by policing the campus. So it seems like quite a, if anyone associated in any way, shape, or form with the university would have been named as a suspect, would have been prosecuted in this case. What effect might that have had on enrollment, on economics? Just throwing out a rhetorical question. And Amy Conway is bringing up, student body, rugs. Unfortunately, it is a fact. As much as we don't want to admit it, as much as we'd like to look the other way, there is a rug problem probably on every campus, whether it's a college, university, on site, right? You've got young people, some as young as 17, 18. They're away on their own for the first time. And they may want to experiment with mommy and daddy not in the same house. Do they go into town, into a city, go into a district where the sale and purchase, the commerce of rugs happen? No. They purchase, for the most part, from other students, people associated. That's a fact. That is a fact. So therefore, just throwing out a rhetorical question, even if, and I know that there's some people who put out theories and believe that rugs played a role here. Even if they didn't, but there was the presence of such things as remember the early rumor that one of the students got mad and flushed down a bunch of rugs in a toilet. You don't think that canine would have detected something like that with their sensitive noses? Opinion. Yes, everyone. I'm glad people are saying opinions because that's your First Amendment right. I mean, it's, Yvonne, as if, let's say before the internet, you're having a conversation with a neighbor over the fence about a big case, or you're at the coffee shop down the street having a conversation. Okay, J-Rod is confirming. J-Rod, I think this was in his book, J-Rod. Green said he was in the room with Ellie every day. Why? What qualifications did he have? What reason did he have being in there every day with law enforcement? Why did law enforcement invite him in? This crime did not happen on campus. That is 100% a big red flag in my opinion. Oh, legendary. Yes. You know why I wasn't going to, but I'm starting to see with the Tyler Robinson case. This is the Kirk tragic for two reasons, legendary. Number one, whether or not you agreed, and a lot of people disagreed with Charles Kirk's platform. The First Amendment was created to protect speech, whether we agree with, and especially unpopular speech. First Amendment covers the right of people to express themselves, to share ideas, to do it publicly, so long as, the things that they say, you're not screaming fire into a movie theater, or you're not yelling BOMB on a plane or things, or you're not defaming someone. People should be able to gather, exchange ideas, speak without being afraid. And that incident, I feel, chilled speech that made people think, well, there's an event that I'd like to go to, or maybe a city commission meeting, or maybe this, or maybe that. But, it's just who knows who's going to show up and if there's going to be a problem. So I'm not going to go. That's a concern from a First Amendment perspective. Another concern is that what I'm understanding is that judge is sealing a lot of documents, same as we saw here in the Idaho versus Kohberger case. So I'm very much, if people want me to cover that case, I will happily do it, because I've already been thinking of doing it again on First Amendment grounds for the most part, because I'm deeply concerned about what happened. And my fear was this was going to establish precedent. because the members of the public play an important role to make sure that people like Bill Thompson, Josh Hurwitz, Judge Hippler, and to some extent, BK's defense team do not overstep their bounds. They have enormous powers, and they're not up there abusing that authority. That's what the First Amendment exists for. So the press could report to the public, or the public could go walk into, you should be able to walk into any courtroom you like, with the exception of a few maybe that involve children or maybe domestic violence or something like that. But for the 98%, 97%, 96% of cases, you should be able to walk in, no problem, watch the proceedings. Make sure that the enormous power, for instance, a judge has, a prosecutor has, is not being abused. That is impossible in cases like Idaho versus Kohberger. And it's looking like the Kirk case is following in those footsteps. And I think it's a very disconcerting and scary situation when that's allowed to happen, when we have these, what I call secret trials, not public trial, including pretrial. Okay, media saying he had no connections, right? Remember the early days of the case when there was, oh, well, he had a connection. He was doing this, he was doing that, he was following them. And he went to the Mad Greek and he supposedly saw either Madison or Zana. And from there, he put his argument into place. Okay, so very, very difficult for some to believe. He had no connection to them, but we're supposed to believe he drove to a DP state, to unalive strangers in a house lit up like 11/22. That makes no sense. What about this? Okay, we don't know because the evidence is under seal. It's possibility he could have done all of that. But what do we know about Mr. Kohberger? That he has been a notorious vegan for many, many years. Remember when that one aunt from Vegas was interviewed and BK had gone to see on a family trip to Vegas? She said she had to go out and buy all new pots and pans. He refused to eat anything that you could have put pots and pans at one time, cooked steak or chicken or whatever it was, in an industrial dishwasher. Oh, no, no, no. BK would not eat anything out of pots and pans that had one time, even if it was just once, and had been cleaned and recleaned and recleaned. She had to go out and purchase new pots and pans to cook. So a vegan of that nature, because there's different levels of vegans, right? Some vegans will still eat fish. Some will wear clothing that is made from animals. Others will not do any of it. BK seemed like more on the end, because you didn't see him wearing a leather jacket, for example. You never saw him wearing clothes that appeared to be, like a fur or something like that. And he lived in Pennsylvania. He lived up in the mountains where it got cold. You saw him in cloth. You saw him, with just regular jackets. So this person who could not eat food that even one time, and it was thoroughly cleaned, had cooked meat, is going to unalive people in that way, up close and personal, with the red DNA coming out of them and probably getting on him. Possibility, yes, all of that could be thrown aside. Okay, so what J-Rod is saying here and exercising his First Amendment freedom of speech, and also the press, because he does independent journalism, they could have been on rugs when committing the crime, but not a rug deal going wrong, right? That had been debunked, respectfully. That's true. That's true. The dog might have picked up a scent anyway, J-Rod, right? I think BA was hired at Pullman LE. Yvonne is pointing out, I think Yvonne, she's saying she believes that BK was hired at Pullman law enforcement. Remember what Detective Payne said when BK was arrested. He was taken on a little, he didn't go right to the Monroe County Jail. They took a little side trip and they went to the Pennsylvania State Police Barracks where he sees Detective Payne and the other detective from ISP. And the first, according to Detective Brett Payne, in his report of that interview, first thing out of BK's mouth, "You look familiar, Detective Payne." And then he proceeds to say later during the interview that he was doing work, as a graduate student for different law enforcement agencies. And that makes a lot of sense. Law enforcement getting free help, maybe from the PhD candidates in criminology, doing some work, cloud work, or doing something that happens all the time. So that's what I think, Yvonne, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're alluding to, you're referencing when you say you think that BK was hired at Pullman LE. Yeah, Meany is also expressing his concern about, from day one, Green was in the meetings, which blows my mind. Why? Is he a member of the Moscow Police Department? Is he a member of the Idaho State Police? Then he doesn't have any business being in there. Especially since that house was not on campus. It would be different. You might be able to, maybe it was on campus and it was owned, but no, it was off campus. Green was all over this case, Yvonne believes. Legendary is saying he is sealing everything and maybe the media blackout. In my opinion, this was a case of DV between the ex and present boyfriends involved. That's a theory that's very popular, J. Rod. Of course, we need the evidence unsealed. J. Top's welcome. If you go back to the 911 call, I hear DM whispering, do you know where Kaylee hid the stuff? That's when Hunter yells, "Get out, get out, get out." Okay. Mittens is saying that she does recall him wearing possibly a leather jacket at the sales potentially. I keep saying this, and it's just one reason. Pleather for the... Okay, and Meany says Green should not have been involved to the extent that he was. Yeah, I mean, to stand up there. Where was usually with these pressers that they have, all of the press conferences that MPD hosted while they were searching for the perpetrator. The lead detective's usually there at those types. We never saw Detective Payne at even one pre-arrest press conference. And the only time he was ever seen, was right after the sentencing when they had that big press conference. It was right in the Ada County Courthouse. There was a room that they were in. It was, who was it? It was the current chief of police. It was Thompson. It was members of the ISP. It was members of the feds. And you had Detective Payne there. It's the only time he's been at any press conference regarding this case. The only time I think he's ever given an interview of any sort. He's not been heard from. Look at all of the people who left the Moscow Police Department, starting early on, beginning with, I don't know, Captain Lanier. The face of the MP was number 2 at these press conferences. He spoke as much or even more than Chief Fry did. And he's gone 6 months later. He retired in June with the trial that was supposed to happen. Trial had still been set for October. BK did not waive Speedy until September of 2023. So that trial was still on. And you're going to jump ship then? Okay, so you had Lanier retiring. Fry retired. Supposedly he was, retired from law enforcement permanently. He ran for Latah County Sheriff, lost that. He's working for another police department. So he didn't retire. He retired from Moscow Police Department. A question whether or not Officer Nathaniel Rosenthal still with the MPD. Can't confirm or deny that. But I did see some documentation online, LinkedIn, that Corbin Smith left the Moscow Police Department about a year ago. One of the first responders, supposed supposedly escort to Detective Brett Payne on November 13th, 2022. We've seen no evidence independently from the PCA that happened. We're still waiting for that. Okay. What size shoe? Brutal is asking, what size shoe did Rosie wear? We don't know. You know what? What I find rather interesting is that Officer Rosenthal was one of the two Banfield cops, right? A coincidence of all coincidences. This quadruple unaliving is happening steps away where two undercover cops were, who, in the report of Rosenthal's partner, Tisdale, wrote that they were up and down Queen and King. They drove past 1122. They saw people standing outside of the house. Rosenthal has written, if Rosenthal wrote a report about what he did, what he saw during the evening of the 12th going into the morning of the 13th when he was undercover duty, it's never been released to the public. So in terms of what shoe size does he wear? I mean, that unknown. J-Rod is saying the G family said that they didn't know about Payne at all. They thought it was another Barrett who was the lead at the whole time. Yeah, do you remember? I mean, there were some newspaper articles where the G family had hit the roof saying that they had just learned that a 2-year, relatively a rookie, a little bit more experienced than a rookie, was leading this major case. That wound up in the newspaper. There was a meeting with MPD along with the G family and their lawyer when they hired their lawyer, and they came out and they gave interviews saying, we have a concern about this. And now they're giving interviews expressing their concern with the University of Idaho. But why would you be concerned with the University of Idaho if you believe that the sole and the correct person responsible for these atrocious, horrendous, horrific crimes were behind bars? Okay, we have been going now for about an hour and a half, and we usually don't go much longer than that. I felt that it was important to get together, number one, to say, is Judge Stephen J. Hippler on strike? Has he retired? Has he taken an early Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's break? Because Monday will be 60 days, and we have not yet, as the public, received an answer to that court order of October 16th regarding the third set of sealed documents, when the previous two orders, the public heard something within 30 and 36 days. That's number one. Number two, to give a little bit of an update on the Idaho 4 defamation case. If you're not following that case, we've been following it for quite a while. This is the only confirmed civil action to come out of 1122 King Road. This was filed by a University of Idaho professor who has filed a 2-count lawsuit against a online personality, TikToker, psychic, who went public and claimed that this university professor had something to do with the crimes and was having an affair with one of the students. That case is getting ready to go to trial. And the defense hasn't filed anything in quite a while, missed a bunch of deadlines. We're wondering, raising the rhetorical question, is this going to be an empty chair trial in February? And then we're also following the Wander case. Oh, the preliminary hearing in Wander is coming up next week. Not sure if that's going to be televised or not, but we will definitely be continuing to cover Wander. And then if there's any interest, we'll also cover the Charlie Kirk case. I was very, very interested, regarding anything that has to do with the First Amendment. That's going to pique my interest. Oh, it was my pleasure, Legendary. It was my pleasure. Okay, so Shaney is saying, I feel that that people are starting to doubt because of all the information that's coming out now. Information that I still don't understand was under seal to begin with. I feel that this case was overly sealed to an extreme. I mean, you can go back to the early days of the podcast. Another order sealing documents, another order sealing discovery. When you hear discovery, that's evidence. Think evidence when you see motion to seal discovery and coming up for consideration for under sealing. I don't know why this case was sealed as much as it was, and I certainly don't know 5 months after Mr. Kohberger's change of plea why it's still under seal to the extent that it is. With Kaylee's civil, so the civil complaint, Brut is bringing up Kaylee's civil complaint. Yeah, Meanie is agreeing. Excessive sealing, yes. Kylie is of the opinion that sealing equals hiding. She has, had the position, hey, transparency. What's going on here? What is going on here with transparency? Yvonne, we don't know what her complaint was. We don't know. We don't know. It's under seal. Again, with the it's under seal explanation or discussion. Okay, anyone have any further comments, opinions, thoughts that you would like to share before we call it a day here at the Indie Zone? Yeah, there was something for the Office of Civil Rights, Mittens. Although I don't know if that's Kaylee's complaint or not. Under seal, of course. All right, guys. Please, 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 if you haven't yet had an opportunity, take a look at our revisiting of the Affidavit of Probable Cause. We got 4 episodes up thus far. The 5th one's going to be published this weekend. We have to go back to the beginning to understand. There's a lot in there that I guarantee that you don't remember. I don't remember them, and I cannot tell you how many times I have read that document up and down and backwards and forwards. You forget things over time. So please, Meanie, I'm so thankful that you felt that this was a good opportunity. I know that you guys, thank you, my go-to channel. I know that you guys have a lot of options so that anyone would spend any of their valuable time listening to our podcast, listening to our content on YouTube, much less subscribing. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and hit the notifications. We got a lot of content coming out. We're getting a lot of information between the lines that we want to share with you. And certainly when these documents hopefully get unsealed, Judge Stephen J. Hippler, very soon we will report on that. I'm glad you did, Sudie. Thank you. Thank you to my precious members. We've had quite a few of them here, Richard and Yvonne and G Wiz and so many others. Yvonne, thank you so much for being here. You don't know how much your memberships are appreciated. So until next time, guys, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for sharing some time. We'll be doing a few more lives before the end of the month, and we'll put out some notifications to you. Hopefully you'll join us then. All right, everybody, please like, please subscribe, please share our content. And until next time, my name's Kathy. Thank you. Amy, thank you for joining us here today, and everyone.